The fences are down, the power's out, and you're at the bottom of the food chain. Hold on to your butts and prepare for Raptor Ruckus RPG, a rules-light D20 tabletop role-playing game. Raptor Ruckus is survival horror by way of dinosaurs in the early 1990s. You'll be scavenging supplies, counting bullets, and evading carnivores, all while the chaos of the island tests your resolve. Something is hunting you, and rising panic is making your stomach churn. Best case scenario, you crack one of the island's many mysteries, steal an embryo or two, and escape with your skin intact. Worst case, you're still alive when they start to eat you. Back Raptor Ruckus on Kickstarter before September 24th.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He once told me the only cult he would join is one that is produced by Chaosium. Stu Horvath.
I mean, it already is sort of a cult.
Yeah. I mean, you're into them for enough money at this point that, you know, I feel like it could go either way.
Right.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Hanging in there.
Nice. What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the Cults of RuneQuest series of books that has been coming out from Chaosium over the last few years. I recently just wrote about the first 5 for posts next year, and they're sort of, I'm still thinking about them, so I thought we'd talk about them.
Oh, they're really churning them out then. That's 5's a lot. So
RuneQuest at its most basic, I think, is sort of even back in the day when it was new and it wasn't super spelled out, the campaign setting world stuff, the way that the world worked and was enmeshed with mythology. But I think that RuneQuest really is, other games are sort of simulators of like combat or medieval life or what it's like to be a rabbit. But I think that RuneQuest is in a lot of ways, I think RuneQuest is a simulation of mythology, just a simulation of what it's like to sort of, build an entirely fictional kind of mythology that sort of adheres to real world ideas of mythology, but, is completely unique and self-contained. But also sort of living with that mythology. Like, we don't live with myth. We have religion, which is different. There's sort of 3 broad categories of stories that we tell, right?
Right.
There's folk tales, which are, on some level, folk tales are known to be fiction. And they're told usually to impart some sort of warning or to entertain. But so there's like a whole class of British fairies called water hags. And the stories around them are literally designed to keep kids away from standing water so they don't drown. No one telling these stories as adults believed in water hags, but children were made to believe in water hags to protect them. And that's sort of the function of folktales, often.
God, I love that. It's so crazy because, and forgive me for diving in here, but man, like, I'm smiling from ear to ear because I feel like we kids who grew up in the 80s, and even the 90s, because you kind of like right on the cusp of that, like, we were like the last generation of kids whose parents would tell us not even folk tales at that point, tall tales, I would say, or just outright lies to prevent us from doing things, like, my mom was like, a friend of mine, her kid did marijuana that one time and died. And I was like, and then I was like, oh my God, because I was like a little kid. And then as I got older, I was like, wait a second, Mom. I was like, which one of your friends? I know all your friends. So you don't know this one. You know what I mean? Like, that's we were the last generation where, we had parents who would try to get one over on us because, there's no internet. We weren't savvy enough to be like, I need to see a body,
Yeah. Now the whole internet's trying to get one over on us.
I know. God damn it. Worst folk tales ever.
So that's that. Yeah. So that's a folktale. Folktale is sort of known to be fiction by at least somebody. Often, sometimes told for entertainment, sometimes as warnings, social reinforcement. A lot of times, legends are like folk tales. They probably aren't true, but they are assumed to be true. And usually legends have some sort of social function that connects a culture group to an earlier period of time of prosperity or power that sort of legitimizes the current way of life. So, like a good example of a legend generally is King Arthur. Like, there's a lot of like people taking for granted that King Arthur existed when he probably did not, or there might have been a figure who was sort of like King Arthur, but isn't actually Arthur, doesn't conform to the romances in a way that people would expect. Another an example, I don't know where I fall with Beowulf, but Beowulf functions in a legendary way because it's a story about what's going on with Danes and Geats in Scandinavia, but it's an English poem, and it was penned, some folks think, as a way for some folks in England to kind of hang their cloak on Beowulf's legacy and say that we are descended from them. And the whole Beowulf story, even though it feels very much a part of like the English landscape, it's a way for a dynasty in England to sort of associate themselves with a storied dynasty across on the continent, and thus sort of, burnish their own glory.
Kind of feels like giving yourself a nickname.
It is a little bit, but like, that's a good way of putting it. But myth is like those two other things, but it's completely different too. Myths don't make sense to people who are outside the system of belief. And I think that might be why, to a modern listener, myth is sort of synonymous with either an outright lie or at least a misunderstanding, right? It's like top 10 myths about whatever. And it's just like, that's not actually what a myth is. A myth isn't
Yeah.
a lie. Sometimes myths are used to explain natural phenomenon, the idea that, the ocean, there's a storm. Oh, Neptune must be angry, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of a vast simplification, though. What myth really is a system, and it's often faith-based, but it's also a system of social and cultural reinforcement. Myths are telling people who are in the know how to behave. It's cultural. So if you're outside the cultural system, you don't understand them in the way that the people who lived with the mythology do. There's no real way to understand what Greek mythology meant to people on a day-to-day basis, because we aren't ancient Greeks and the context for it is long gone. And you can see this. We take for granted a lot of Greek mythology and Norse mythology because they've been told so many times, and they've become a kind of fiction taken outside of their social context. Like, take the idea of Perseus and Medusa, right?
Yeah.
Perseus goes and he cuts off Medusa's head, and he takes the head and he uses it for a whole bunch of other stuff. Medusa wasn't actually doing anything wrong.
Oh boy.
She was just over there living her life. And Perseus gets all these toys from the Greek gods and goes and kills her and then uses her
It's just the
head.
way.
Well, yeah. So to a modern, and if you go with Ovid or Virgil, I can't remember who, but one of them gave further context to the myth, saying that she was turned into Medusa was just a beautiful woman who was turned into this hideous monster by Athena as punishment for being raped in Athena's temple by Poseidon. So,
Jesus Christ, that's got layers.
yeah, so all of this stuff to a modern person is just like, man, Medusa was wronged, right? But
Yeah.
there's
Repeatedly.
but figures in Greek myth, particularly, you're not supposed to assign that kind of, they're not real. They're symbols for something that we don't quite understand. And for the Greeks, it meant something differently. there's no the hero is the hero and the monster is the monster, right? The monster represents some sort of chaos or danger to the greater society, and Perseus is civilization dealing with that. There's no real intentional or even unintentional commentary on like gender in that story for the Greeks, probably.
I mean, that's a it's like a hat on a hat when it comes to like misogyny and like it's
I mean, it was a matriarchal. It was a patriarchal society, so like there's undertones of that. But like just in terms of the pure narrative, we accept the story because we've heard it so many times. But if you look at it and really appraise it as a novel or a short story, it doesn't make sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because there's more going on to the story that we don't have access to as modern American readers,
yeah,
right?
fair play.
That's my main point.
Yeah, my takeaway is fuck Perseus.
Me too. And Hercules and a lot of those guys, like they suck. And the monsters were really just like things that were minding their own
They're
business.
just hanging out, you know, like
A
probably having
lot
a
of
snack,
sympathy. Yeah.
reading a book, watching a favorite program. Then this dickhead comes running in with a sword and like a mirror. It's like, oh,
So many times in myth, it's like this guy with a sword looking for trouble and getting it.
yeah, yeah. Basically, it's like propaganda for like home invasion, you know.
Right. So a lot of myth, there's a book called A Short History of Myth by Karen Armstrong, which is really, it's about the way, it's not about specific myth. It's about sort of how myth has functioned for people over the years without getting into specifics and how it's changed and how we don't have a lot of mythological mindset anymore. And I think it's really interesting. And I think my main takeaway, the simplest takeaway, this is a really complicated subject. I had,
Oh,
and,
we're diving deep on this one, man.
and I've worked with this a lot because of the monster book and I've worked to try and kind of understand it, but I only barely understand it. And I feel like there's always going to be an asterisk at the end of any sentence that you're talking about when dealing with mythology. That said, I think that the main thing that I've taken away from Karen Armstrong's book is this idea that myth is the way by which normal people connect with the numinous or immortal. So often mythological figures are sort of the epitomes or the archetypes of certain types of behavior. Artemis is the hunter, and she uses the hunter example. I think it's really good, but you can apply it to anything, especially with RuneQuest. There's like all these gods that are dedicated to farming or daily activities. I think the hunter is the easiest to sort of comprehend. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, right? And a hunter will worship Artemis and try to emulate the stories attached to her and her prowess and try to tap this idea of the perfect hunter in the actions of their hunt, right?
Right.
And sometimes through myth and through this mythological mindset, a hunter becomes sort of all hunters, and then through reenactment of the myth in the hunt, they become Artemis. They become the hunter, right?
Right.
It's all this way to kind of like push your daily mundane existence out of the way to focus on this one thing that you're doing perfectly good and entering a space in which you are no longer just a human. You're something else. You're connected to something outside of time, and you do the thing perfectly. And then as soon as you're done with it, your connection to the numinous disappears really rapidly, and like you go back to mundane reality. But in that one moment, you are the god, right?
Whoa.
And I think that that's sort of the function of mythology. Karen Armstrong definitely, kind of lays it out much more elegantly. All that said, I was reading the first book in the series is mythology, and there's a foreword by Greg Stafford, which basically he's saying the same exact thing about Glorantha and RuneQuest as Karen Armstrong was saying about myth. It's this idea, and it's built into the game. Hero questing was always this idea that the gods have their stories, and we are trying to reenact those stories by way of ritual and this mystical process known as hero questing. And through hero questing, you could bring back powers and knowledge from the gods from myth and bring it into your tribe and your daily life. It'll help you in war and it'll help you in farming and all these things that could be applied to through accessing myth. It's been in the game since the very beginning, but over time it's been refined to this point where like these books are like it really is not just a simulation of like this idea of a Greek mythology book for kids. It is actually simulating the action of myth as laid out by Karen Armstrong as this thing, this different mindset that allows humans to be more than they are on their daily life. It's wild.
Research, man.
I feel like people are going to listen to this episode and be like, man, what's he talking about?
What can you do?
But then it's great too, because what are we doing as players of role playing games? We're inhabiting like another mindset, right? So like it works on this meta level, and it always has. So the Cults of RuneQuest, like that's why I've been sort of mulling it over because it's so close to mythology and it's so fascinating to me that it has developed over time. And it was started by Stafford in, as soon as he started playing with the idea of Glorantha in the 60s before role-playing games even existed. And it got embedded when it was the role-playing game. But Greg didn't always have a firm hand in the development of Glorantha. And since his death, a lot of other hands have gotten in the mix, but it just keeps growing and becoming more and more real. Like the approach is just really trying to capture something about mythology that is really hard to kind of explain and talk about, but it is managing despite all these things that you would expect to kind of disrupt the project.
So, do you think, and this is a couple thoughts that I have. Do you think that it's harder to achieve that in a world where I would say the average age of the people who this would appeal to already have their own preconceived notions of what a lot of these like myths and mythology is? And also translating that to something that'll work at a gaming table where while it is, if you play this way, theater of mind, and there should be perceivably no limits, there are always some type of guardrails and something that'll kind of keep you corralled into the world that you're in.
So I might argue, and I stress the might, because I'm not sure about this, but I might argue that even though we live in a world where myth has sort of faded into the background and doesn't seem useful anymore, I think that we're still wired for it and searching for it, and that role-playing games are an expression of human desire for mythological thinking. And if that is true, I think that RuneQuest is the purest expression of that.
All right, nice.
But there's all sorts of qualifiers in there. But I do think that there's something going on there. And I think because we are sort of always looking for that, I think that it doesn't matter what age you are when you come to it. I think that RuneQuest, if you get past the initial hump of like, whoa, this is a lot, because it is. RuneQuest, Glorantha, the lore is a lot to handle, and especially prior to this, but when everything was piecemeal and hard to find. Now everything's becoming unified through Chaosium's publishing efforts. It's easy to sort of have all the data that you need, the raw lore to kind of is there to sort of build your foundation of Glorantha knowledge. So it's a little bit easier than it was 10, 15 years ago when I started. But I think that if you are a person who can get past the gigantic loreness of it, I think that it will sort of break down your preconceptions pretty rapidly. And the nice thing about this series of books is that it was really intended as an entry path into the world of Glorantha. There's several of them now, but this is the one that brings you in via myth. And the books are arranged in a way that it's really, I find it very easy to kind of get a handle on the lore and to immediately start playing with it. I mean, it's so baked into the setting that it's sort of weird that these books didn't exist, as the newest edition of the game kind of came out.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and it's just like there's only so much time, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, let's small independent publisher here, dude. I know.
Yeah. But like and testament to the importance of this. Like this has been the cults of the world are, one of the most important world building publications for RuneQuest was Cults of Prax back in 78, I think. Maybe 79. And then there was Cults of Terror. There's at least two box sets for the Avalon Hill third edition that are dedicated to cults. Before this edition came out, when Isseries Incorporated was sort of the caretaker of Glorantha, they did a cults compendium that's this massive 500 or 600 page hardcover that is just collection of all the cults and how they function, and we're not talking just about like a deity that you get in Dungeons and Dragons where it's just like you quote unquote worship them and they bestow spells on you, and like maybe you have like a certain shirt that you wear that shows your allegiance.
Yeah, it's kind of weak.
Yeah, this is much more robust, and it's not limited to stuff that's useful to adventurers. A lot of these aren't useful to adventurers because they're baked into the actual day-to-day lives of the people. So there's aspects of the cult that are about the society that you live in, and your responsibilities to that society. There's, special powers that come out of it. It does sort of function as your class as a RuneQuest character, like somebody who's a member of the cult of Chalana Arroy is going to naturally be the party healer because she's the goddess of healing and medicine. But it doesn't really work like class, and it's a lot more complicated because there's all these different ways that they connect to society and the world.
Yeah.
So all of the cult entries sort of tackle this, and there's like initiations and mysteries that you're sort of brought into as you progress in your faith. All of that stuff has been laid out in these cults books for years, and now for this edition it's just like we're going to do this, and it's going to be 10 volumes. I don't know what all 10 are. I only know the 6 that I have currently, and you have the first book is about mythology, the second is the Prosopedia, which is basically like a dictionary of all of the different entities that are somewhat divine to fully divine, plus some organizations, books, and key concepts like the Sky Dome. The Sky Dome is the same for every religion in Glorantha because there's no mistaking the fact that there is a sky, and it's a cosmological thing that is universal for the world.
Look up, there it is.
Yeah, like so there's things that aren't, like that's just one thing. And also like I believe that Glorantha is a square piece of earth that's sort of floating in a void. Like that's just a truth about the world. And then yeah, you have a dictionary of all that stuff, and then you get into the individual pantheons. The first volume of pantheons is the Lightbringers, which is the storm gods, and the storm gods kind of Orlanth is the king of storms, and he kills the sun, Yelm, because Yelm had imprisoned Ernalda, who is the Earth Mother, and Orlanth was courting her, so he kills Yelm, releases Ernalda. But then they realize, well, this stinks because now we don't have a son. So Orlanth is like, man, I screwed up. I could have gone about this differently. Let me go to hell and get the sun back. And he gets these followers who are called the Lightbringers, and they go down to hell, and it's a big thing and they bring the sun back. And basically, the result of that is sort of a unification of all the gods, and the creation of time and history follows their action in the resurrection of the sun. So that's the Lightbringers and the Storm Gods. Then the second book is the Earth Goddesses, which is Ernalda and a lot of associated deities. Like you get the weird elves and dwarves are very strange in RuneQuest, but their gods are in here. And then the fifth book is the Lunar Way. Man, so the Lunar Empire is like a completely different group that when the gods were in charge before time in history, they fought a lot and some disasters happened. And the fallout from those disasters created cracks in reality through which chaos entered. Chaos hates reality. It wants to unmake reality in the world, in the context of Glorantha. And there was a lot of difficulty in getting rid of chaos. And then when time and history were created, it was sort of a pact between all the gods to sort of to seal out chaos. But there's still ways for chaos to get in. That said, everybody who worships Orlanth or Yelm or all of these gods that came before time believe that chaos is taboo and evil and something that should be avoided and fought at all costs. It's an unambiguous thing. The Lunars, on the other hand, think that a little bit of chaos is okay as long as you take the adequate precautions. I've never been super convinced that that is the case. I feel like there's a strong narrative in the fiction embedded there that is just like, yes, the Lunars will tell you to your face that like this is fine, and Illumination sort of seems like it's okay. But at the end of the day, they have a giant demon bat that they use human sacrifices to control. So they're probably the bad guys, no matter how compelling their arguments are.
Oh, that's good. That's at least something.
They have their whole own they have a red goddess, and it has like weird parallels to the seven light bringers, and it's all very interesting. But I do think that they're at pains, especially in the modern era, I think, to present the Lunars as an alternate way of thought that is completely valid, and I don't buy it. I do think that they just wind up being, because they're also an oppressive empire. They kind of go in and they're oppressing the Orlanthes, and there's a whole thing. And then, so that's the fifth book. The sixth book just came out, and that's devoted to the sun god, the fire gods, Yelm, and all those guys. And then I guess darkness will be a thing, the troll gods. And then I don't know, that's still seven. So there's like three more books. And these are just beautifully illustrated, incredibly detailed. Like I could read these things for days. Like they're fantastic.
Oh yeah, they make beautiful books over there.
All of the art is, well, not all of the art, but a large proportion of the art is presented as in-universe art, the sort of stuff that you might find in a temple or as part of like a tapestry or like something that somebody's carrying around, like an icon or something. So, and they all draw from, they have aesthetic influences that are drawn from world mythology, our world mythology, but reconfigured in a way that like sort of harkens to world mythology to help us help me as the reader kind of understand it, like by providing these visual touchstones, but also because they're so reconfigured that they're completely new and interesting. Like Orlanth in a lot of ways is like, he's sort of like Zeus, but he also presents a bit like Odin. But in the latest iterations of him, he is blue skinned and has four arms, which is like a very South Asian kind of way to present a god. But he
Right.
still has these Celtic and Norse kind of characteristics to him. And it's just cool to sort of see that kind of reconfiguration. I really appreciate that. And because you're dealing with myth where nothing really makes sense, it sort of resonates on a cool vibratory frequency. Anyway, this was a lot. I welcome to Mythology 101, Hambone. I'm sure
Thank you all, dear listeners, for auditing the class.
essays count for 50% of your grade. Attendance is the other 50%. Maybe this was fun. Maybe we'll do it again. I don't know. I feel like I hit the poor listeners with a lot of high level thinking on my high level thinking on mythology. Maybe it's not high level for everybody.
Hey,
But
man, they were the ones that said our episodes were too short.
yeah,
So
yep. Careful what you wish for.
you
You're
got
gonna
to be
get me just
careful what you wish
rambling
for,
on.
dog. You know, you just might get it.
I feel like I was thinking about like we could talk about this, or we could talk about Old Morris Cave, which would be a much shorter show. And I was like, but I worked a lot with the mythology stuff in the monster book, and I feel like I'm gonna have to talk about it at some point. So I should start practicing now. So this is probably gonna come up multiple times in the future. Because just I if somebody who isn't a podcast listener asks me about mythology and it's like on like a stage or something, I need to not sound like an idiot.
You got to pony up, man. And you know, all kidding aside, we do appreciate you, dear listener. You know that we tell you all the time because we love you, and we couldn't do this without you. So you know, thank you for listening to us ramble incessantly about whatever we just rambled about for the last like 40 minutes. Cults. Yeah, we were talking about cults. So this is another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
VintageRPG.com. we're it's interesting because I do a theme. I don't think anybody notices the theme, but I do a theme every year for the last several. Last year's theme was for the 50th anniversary of D&D. I did lots and lots of Mayfair Rolaids because I thought it would be funny to do the entire line of Rolaids, which are D&D knockoffs, for the 50th anniversary of D&D. This year it's been just art books, and next year is a lot of books on monsters and 90s weirdness like cryptids and conspiracy theories and all that jazz. And I feel like I feel like I feel like I'm getting to the point where it's going to turn into like an esoterica blog, especially with like if we're going to keep like I got the RuneQuest cults book, and we're turning into you got to change. You got to constantly be changing, right?
You got to change, you got to evolve, and also you're giving people something cool to read.
It's true,
and like a fun little education that will help them in their yeah, I don't know, I got nothing there, but it'll probably be cool for you at your table. That you'll have a fun little factoid that you got from old Stu on his website, vintagerpg.com. You can find me across the internet, hamandeggpublishing.com, and at John McGuire RPG on Instagram and on Blue Sky. I've been posting more here and there. Posted a picture of myself the other day and my cat. It was adorable. But, speaking of, the reason why we started websites was because we're trying to get out of the cycle of madness that is social media where nobody sees our shit. So with that in mind, my friends over at Solarian Games just launched Analog Union. So it's over at analogunion.com. And what it is a group newsletter for independent tabletop game creators. It's a way for us to share, promote our products, and just talk about whatever we're working on. It's going to be a pretty cool thing. I really do recommend and would appreciate it if you check out analogunion.com. Some of the companies involved already are Arcane Sword, Get Haunted Industry, Planet X Games, the Salt Heart RPG, Severed Books, and obviously Solarian. It's their website. And your old buddy HB is there too. It's a great way to stay involved in the tabletop RPG community and stay abreast of what is happening with a lot of really cool independent creators who work really hard, who are just disappearing into the ether that is social media. So analogunion.com. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really actually do help other listeners to find us. If you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We usually get early release episodes up between Friday and Sunday, depending on when we record them in the week, and you can get access to early episodes for as little as $1 a month. At the $5 tier, we have a game that I run every month. I just generally run something different every month. I've had a couple fun things that we talk about on the show that I've been running, but I have an ongoing play by email 1-900-Fantasy campaign that's going into its 4th week. People are having a really good time with it. It's really surprising me the direction it's going in. So at the $5 tier, you can get it on that with me. At the $10 tier, you can get it on my games. And also, Stu's going, 3 years now?
It'll be 3 years in the spring.
Going on 3 years. Legendary. Very, 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 can't stress this enough, deadly West Marches campaign. Anyone I talk to who plays in it is pretty jazzed about it, and most of them have died at least once, so that is a pretty cool thing. But definitely check that out, the $10 tier, patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor. Thanks for listening. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Schaefer Brown. Edited by R. Alex Murray. Check us out at vintagerpg.com.